Hey folks, Steve here with another End of Empire video. We will be looking at 1776 in this video. Last video we did 1775 and we played through some things. I've had to make a few corrections that I screwed up in the last video. I'm not going to put a comment on the previous video. I'm just going to correct the issues here. If somebody brings these things up on the previous video, you guys will see that I know I fixed it. I fixed it. First things first. These guys were going to suffer attrition if they stayed in the wilderness, but they had the last action before the end of the turn, and they have automatic initiative, so I moved them back to where they would be able to count to supply, and that's fine for them. This next winter turn, we could see maybe the British begin to march out, but I'm not sure. They might do that. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see. What else do I need to correct? And just watch out. We're going to have some reinforcements for turn 6 that are going to be a militia fight again against the British. We'll see how that goes. And then there's one other thing. I said that the British lost their first step as like, hey, you lost Montreal. I realized that when I did the die roll for the sole Canadian regiment that attacked Montreal, that I didn't count the -1 due to the lack of von Steuben reforms, and so it should have been a different result, and so I put that result on the board. So the defender remains, and then this unit had taken a step loss, and now there's more stuff that's coming in as reinforcement to help there. But there you go, and I'll call out stupid dumb mistake to not leave a guy in that hex to keep those Canadian units from coming in. I really should have just plopped something. And I'm trying to remember like why I came back over here with Carleton. I think it was to pick up some reinforcements. So in me doing that, I kind of fouled up, and I that could have some pretty dramatic impacts on the game for the life of the game for me screwing that up. A lot of screw ups, I guess, overall. And I'll call out, I also did some leader redeployments. Prevost is up in Halifax, while Clinton is down in St. Augustine to kind of get some leaders out there. In Howe's stack, we still have Percy. Basically, for any stack that you expect there to be a lot of combat for, you want to have a spare leader in there to suffer any leader losses, so you don't have Washington die in 1775 or 76. So Washington still has, who is it? Putnam. We moved Putnam into his stack with leader redeployments, and several other things are going on. We've got poor Thomas up here. He's going to be withdrawn in a couple turns, but he may make a final big play to get Montreal. This Arnold unit will likewise probably try to do something in the winter, but it's going to be very difficult to make any headway just due to the situation. So, yeah, a little bit of a preamble. I've already done the reinforcements, so nothing too crazy. No new native impacts. It's still winter, which is going to make it hard to do much of anything. We could see maybe Howe deciding to come out of Boston to kick Washington in the shins or something, but I don't know that we're actually going to see that happen here. Winter times are tough times. And yeah, the fact that we've got to do North American supply for a lot of units, it is kind of weird to see how units trace supply. So for instance, this guy, he's in wilderness, so how do we get him supply? Well, we trace down this river and then back up this river to Salisbury, because that's the best supply trace that he has. Him just sitting out here. It's his entry hex, but it's not actually a supply hex. So you have to figure out like where's your supply coming from, and even the end of this river line is not a supply hex. So there's some weirdness in how these rivers kind of connect for being out in the wilderness. Or I guess no, I'm sorry, he's a ranger, so he doesn't have to trace supply. My bad. Jeez, guys. I know what I'm doing. We also put Montgomery down here. He's going to be our sort of Virginia defense, be a fast response force, fast action response force if the British decide to come in around this area. really the British are waiting for their fleet, which they're going to get when the weather gets nicer. Their fleet will come in at the end of this turn. The uh, Boston powder shortage goes away, so we're also kind of just waiting for that to resolve itself. So this will be a quick 1776 turn. We're probably not a lot is going to happen just because the leaders that are going to be rolling. Um, and well, in the south map, I guess we could see some stuff happen, but I'm not sure. We are starting to get some artillery units on the board, and this year is going to be a big year for reinforcements and more stuff being added to the board, which is going to make it really tricky. There's just so much to look at any given time, and a lot of die rolling to see if stuff can activate and just what can you try to do. I think in the very basic sense, like what the Americans are trying to achieve so far, they're surviving. The British are just waiting for some more options to open up, and then I think it's going to get really a lot more challenging for the American force. So let me play through this winter turn, and then we'll start looking at spring 1776. Okay, here we are at the spring of 1776, guys, and just a few minor things have occurred. We had Carleton come out of Quebec, and he ended up winning strong victories against the Canadian units there and managed to eliminate them, and then is going to squat in that hex. We did have Arnold's unit, the auto activate leader, caused some problems. He came in, he did attack that lone British regular, and so we do have one British regular step off map now, counting towards victory. But he ended up it was like a sacrifice play, and that's all she wrote. Did manage in the process to get rid of the Allied Indian by walking into their village, and so a little, this could have gone a much better. The invasion of Canada could have gone much better. We still have Thomas here, but he's going to leave before long. We'll get a different leader in there. Excuse me. And just generally everywhere else, you can see a lot more American units are coming onto the board. We had some British activity up here that was, this was actually last year in 1775, but they got pushed out by some Virginia regiments, and now we're getting some more reinforcements. What I want to try to do is lock down these entry hexes just so the British don't have an easy way in. And the very slow to come forward, native units, just because it's really hard to activate them. They're not getting anywhere fast. Though we did move, we did get a leader here that we've moved around a little bit to try to activate some units that are showing up in the far west a little bit. And I think what we're going to do with Clinton is we're going to have him do a ground assault along the coast, because what I want to do, we now have the British fleet pretty much every turn, at least for the next long while. And so I think what I want to do is plug him in the North Atlantic and get something going to attack the Americans in New York, and see if we can't get them to get forced out and we take control of New York. I think we've done as much as we can with Boston. We need to get into New York. We just need to get into that space and make sure we can get reinforcements. There's a couple other things we could try to do over the next couple of turns. The alternative would be to try to attack Washington, and I don't think that makes sense to do. And our force is starting to get, weakened, and if we dilly-dally too much, it's just going to hurt us. The alternative, which this is what I may end up doing, is I may pull him out. Actually, let's try this. Why don't we pull out to Halifax, and then you see next turn we're going to get a whole mess of stuff, and it might be better to wait for that. I'll mull this over a little bit. We'll come back at the start of the summer turn, which I have something special planned for that, I think. But we will see what happens here, guys. Okay, here we are at the beginning of June, the first summer turn of 1776. Kind of a lull. There wasn't a lot, not a huge amount of stuff going on. Uh, we did have Clinton start to march up the coast, and he is on the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia. Meanwhile, various American units are kind of trying to figure out whether they spread out to control the entry hexes of the British or do they try to merge together. But they need leaders to do this. So you just have a lot of these American units kind of strewn about, trying to pick some good positions. Philadelphia has a whole mess of units inside of it, which is kind of good from just being attacked sort of thing. New York similarly has a fair number of units. We have gone ahead and moved Washington over there. So we walked into Boston. The British had left it, and we stationed some guys to guard the coast. We moved Washington over to New York. He's got a number of units and other leaders there with him, sort of awaiting the British because he just figures they're coming. Sure enough, we have the fleet here. Um, and everything in the north is kind of quiet with reinforcements needed for the British to really push out of Canada at this point. What I have done is I've moved the reinforcements for this turn, which were a lot for the British, into Halifax rather than just invade right off the boat because I needed to do some swapping of units between. So what my goal is here, the ranking leader is Howe, but what I'm going to try to do, this feels a little gamey, but I don't know. We're going to have him command Cornwallis, if I can roll a 4 or less, command Cornwallis to do the naval invasion, and he's going to take what is the main British army here, this gigantic stack of guys. It's like well over 100 attack power, I think. I have to double count it again. Ignore this sheet of paper; it's not being used right now. This huge stack with a few provincials to bleed off step losses to hit New York probably, and then we have the remnant of the force that was in Boston. And what I'm thinking is I'm going to take Howe somewhere else with those guys as a break off set of units. And then just knowing that we're going to get even more reinforcements here soon, I may push some of these guys that are going to be coming in through Canada. So I just kind of need to think through what I want to do with that. But generally, I think we're going to be okay for some big show landing in New York this next summer or during this summer turn. Everything else is kind of up in the air in terms of what can we achieve, what can we do. Starting to get more agents deployed. There's really only one more agent for the British that needs placing. Everything else is starting to fill out. We got the agent here in Montreal, a unit that's there, starting to get some provincials that are helping to maintain the front here. Um, so yeah, really just kind of waiting for more things to come onto the board. We are watching out for turn 13, which is going to be a big turn for other reinforcements. I need to do a quick lap around and do some with. We'll have some withdrawals at the end of this turn. So some things I got to watch out for. I got to diligently look across the map at the counters and just make sure I know what's coming in and out. And what's tricky is, and I think you could have an easier time with Vassal, like in those big stack of units, it's like, oh, some unit is going to show up like here is, a British unit's going to show up here. Like do I have a good read of that? If I scan through the Vassal module, it'd be very easy to look. Or if I'm playing physically, like I've got to pick up the stack, I've got to sift through it. Maybe say, well, don't look at that. It's kind of like cheating. These things should be surprises. Like, okay, but it's not like it's hidden information, not really. So I don't know. So far, so good as the Americans, but I feel like over the next 2 turns, this is when things are going to get a little kooky. And as we go into the turn after this, so the August turn, I got something a little different scooped up for us to hit as we enter the rest of summer 1776. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. They are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. You'll have to forgive me for the sentimentality with this, and for the pedantic out there. Yes, I left out the indictments, the failed warnings, and denunciation sections for brevity. The United States has, in many ways, a haunted history. It can be easy today to get down on this country for wrongs committed, but these words remind me that in the journey to proper equal rights and progress, the United States still has the capability to reach potential much further afield. These words remind me that, if not here, then where? So I can't help but be a little moved by the Declaration of Independence in light of this. That was published, obviously, in July 1776, which is somewhere between the last turn and the beginning of this turn, but it felt appropriate to read those words and remind us viewers here what is the context of the conflict that we're showing here. The country we are today is not the same as the country we were in 1776, and much will continue to change. We get closer to the greatest ideals that were put to paper in the Declaration of Independence. Even the time it was written, it was not fully fulfilling the true meaning of the words that were written. There's so much that still had to be addressed and still continues to be addressed, but the hope is always there to continue along that path, to continue striving for the things that were dictated in the document. Okay, well, with that bunny trail aside, let's see where things have gotten this summer in turn 8 of the game. I will say I did forget to pull off Mr. Thomas here. We'll go ahead and get rid of him. There might be some other units that need to be pulled off here. I think we're good, though. Yeah, okay. I think that's good enough for now. Okay, so what's gone on? Well, let's take a look down in the South. Clinton has pacified Georgia, while we do have some Rangers up here in the north and a little bit of a dance with some native tribes, though I think the American allies are going to get chopped up here in a second. The situation down here near Charleston, Clinton moved into this hex and was actually intercepted by Montgomery, and Montgomery won. He actually he caused with the British rolled low, but they took two step losses. The Americans took one, and then on the American action, they retreated back to Charleston. But Charleston or Clinton took a step loss, and then he actually took a step loss on one of the British regulars. So it's putting him in a little bit of a tight spot. He's going to get a whole bunch of reinforcements, I think, over this next turn, but that was kind of important to slow down the Southern progress there. Everything else is pretty quiet along the coast as things are kind of prepared. I thought we were going to have a big New York battle, but of course, Howe rolled crap and didn't activate, which means that Cornwallis didn't activate, which means we've got a bajillion guys hanging out in Halifax with nothing to do. Very disappointing. We did have, this was silly. I had, what's this guy's name? Peugeot try to come down here to start threatening the Americans out this way. And of course, I roll a 1 for this guy to intercept, and then this is actually a really strong ambush unit, and he actually wipes out the units that I had with Peugeot, which was like a provincial, so it's not a big deal, like this guy and some native units or a native unit. And so much for that. I just, that didn't go the way I thought it would go. We were hoping to get the jump on the Americans, but sure enough, I rolled a 1 for evasion. That was something. Had got just enough to get through that. So everything else is relatively stable here, waiting for the big show to head out. I think now that we're going to get even more reinforcements for the British, it's going to make the attack on New York even more effective. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. We'll go into then what is turn. Yeah, it should be going into turn 9 next. I guess I didn't do the reinforcements, but we'll get to that. Very quickly, I'm gonna show you guys the reinforcements for turn 9. So we put a whole bunch down here in Savannah, some additional British to support Clinton, and then a bunch of our Germans, who I think we're gonna have help do the sweep. I think so. We have a bunch of British along the coast, try to have the Germans kind of hit some areas up here with the goal of, again, carpeting the entry hexes and just tying up things. I think the main thing we want to make sure we're trying to do is shut some things down so that those fronts go quiet, at least as quiet as they can be, and then we can continue moving north and squeeze things out that way. A number of different reinforcements have come in for the Americans, a number of new leaders. So we've got Spencer down here. We've got Heath. I've got him assigned here. We've got Green, who's going to start to pick up some of these guys in the south. We still have a lot of stuff in Philadelphia. Washington still has New York, and generally a basic quiet setup here. Still a lot that could occur. I also put some guys, a lot of British forces here in Canada. This is going to be the formation of our sort of like Canadian army that, we're going to keep this guy, kind of poking around, but we want to swing down this way and beat up on the Americans as best we can. And hopefully Howe gets off his butt and is able to command Cornwallis to take a run. We'll see what happens. All right, we'll play through turn 9, and we'll show things for the next turn and fall. Okay, here we are at the start of turn 10, which will be a fall turn. I've already done the reinforcements. There's a whole set of, the holding box is not enough if I lay the counters out like this, but a whole bunch of reinforcements. So New York got some additional provincial units added, which will help buffer the British and I put some Germans in here as well. So there's some Germans, a bunch of British in New York, sort of home base with our guy Cornwallis being the commander because he activates frequently and he can fight Washington on modifiers pretty well. I also put some additional reinforcements here with Howe and Halifax this whole bit, and we are going to use them for a naval invasion this turn. So now that we are in New York, I'm going to do a pincer, and I think I'm going to target Maine and restore British colonial government to Maine, and then start to work our way south from there and see if we can't kind of cause a bunch of problems. Meanwhile, we've got still a stack that can't seem to activate up here. We did run up some reinforcements to our guy Sullivan. I might be related to that guy, but he is he's got some rifles with him in the wilderness. He's going to see what he can do to tie up the British down here as best as he can. He also has some infantry. It's not going to be enough to stop a concerted effort, but it might be enough to slow him down. We might try to get this unit up with him as well, depending on how things go. Washington's just hanging out in White Plains. Like right now, there's not a whole lot he can do. He really can't even try to attack New York at this point. So if anything, he just wants to leverage the terrain that he's in to get around, move about, do what he can, basically. And then further south, we've got just a smattering of different units that are kind of still figuring out what they want to do. I've got Heath still here gathering up forces. Further down below, Spencer's still got some units, and we're throwing a bunch of reinforcements in with Montgomery to defend Charleston with a smattering of different units. Even some of these rifles, which it's like, this is kind of a waste to have them down here, but I almost need every factor that I can get reasonably. I'm going to fix that stack in a second. But the important stacks all at this point have some level of artillery, so we're not completely shut down on the artillery front, but we are facing a challenge. Facing a challenge in many other places. We did manage to get an activation here with Sterling, and he came out and took out the allied tribe unit. We can't get the Catawba back right away, but we at least eliminated the Choctaw unit, and things have quieted down. May try to pull him back around and do something to disrupt these guys. I mean, the I can't activate him for crap, but I still would like to get these guys going. I couldn't even activate Clinton, but what I wanted is for Clinton to come back, grab these guys, move forward, have the Germans come out this way, like I said, or maybe we wait until we can swing down the river line here, because this wilderness could be a problem with those riflemen able to do something. If they back off, I'm not sure. So there you go, guys. That's the setup for the fall turn. We'll play through that pretty quickly here. Okay, hey guys, here we are at the beginning of turn 11, which is the last winter turn of 1776. After this, we would go into the first winter turn of 1777. And some interesting things have occurred. So Montgomery activated and decided to attack and engage Clinton, who could just not for the life of him activate, or these guys to activate. I kept rolling crap for activation, so he's kind of sitting here all by his lonesome, and Montgomery goes on the attack. I think most important thing that happened was that the combats were relatively even, but it was worth it to the Americans to try because they could do damage to British regulars. And now, as a result of all these actions, I should point out, we now have 3, 5, 7 steps of British regulars destroyed. Amazing. Excellent work. The reason why that happened is after the first round of combat, we rolled leader loss. And sure enough, Clinton got captured. He rolled a 1, which means he could either have died, been injured, or captured, and he was captured. So if you're curious where this is at, it's here, just so you make sure you don't forget. Basically, every round of combat that there's a die roll result, you should roll for leader loss. And Clinton got captured, which meant that the British stack there basically could not retreat, could not willingly retreat. We just couldn't get it. They couldn't get away. And that allowed Montgomery to activate again, or at least to pass an initiative check and continue combat. And he did that enough times that he wore the British down to dust. And without getting too crazy, he retreated back to Charleston because he did not think he'd be able to certainly not take on this big stack here. But that's all in a good day's work there, chipping away at the British there. So I think that's one of the important things that can happen that can shift the game is if you have a leader loss. And unfortunately, Clinton only had himself as the leader. The best thing to do in your big stacks is to have spare leaders to suffer those losses for you. Well, in this case, Clinton was by his lonesome. He still never was able to get in with his reinforcements. He was a little too cavalier trying to march up to Charleston before we wanted to go back and pick those guys up, and that got him into trouble. So significant. While Georgia is still return to the crown, South Carolina fights on, and we'll see what goes on here. Everything else is relatively straightforward. We did have Cornwallis come out. He pushed Washington back, and now they put a garrison of Germans in White Plains, kind of daring Washington to come back. And this is mostly just to kind of present some difficulty for the Americans, just kind of throwing the British throwing their weight around a little bit. But holding up in New York only does so much. We really need to be able to do more, but we don't want to present ourselves a clean target for Washington. So it's kind of this weird situation. But we'll have to have a more concentrated campaign out of here soon enough. We did, with Howe's force, capture Maine and returned it to the British Crown. So the next stop for Howe is going to be moving west to try to take New Hampshire and take Boston by land, potentially retake Boston, as the case may be. Meanwhile, our big stack in Canada can't get off its own butt, amazingly rolling a 6 for Carleton's activation, so we couldn't get that moving, though we would very much like to. And everything else is relatively stable. We're going to see at the end of this turn a lot of withdrawals, which will show after I've played through the turn. I just want to kind of show the game position. The Americans have experienced some decent things going on for them. I think what they may try to do is open up a second. Well, let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 fronts. Maybe we open up a 5th front somewhere in Virginia and contest Heath, but we got to figure out where that's going to come from. Maybe we take some of these guys, or we simply wait for the whole set of more reinforcements that are going to be coming in. And maybe that's the easier thing to do, is just wait for more reinforcements. All right, I'm going to play through this winter turn. It's probably going to be pretty quick, and then we'll just show the aftermath of 1776. Okay, here we are at the actual end of 1776 after the turn is complete, and we have withdrawn the withdrawals, so the Americans have lost a number of units from their main stacks, though in the south we remain relatively stable. The British haven't lost much. We're really in kind of a tough spot, as it feels like, as the Americans, because we're just kind of waiting to get punched, right? Like, it's like, where can you go? What can you do? You have these scattered units, and anywhere where the British chooses to engage you, they're almost certainly going to be outnumbering you quite a bit. So the need to attrit the British down is an important one, but it's very difficult to figure out, like, where can you go. Right now, Howe is looking to maybe kick in the door of Boston, and then that leaves a little bit more opening to quickly capture the rest of the supply hexes in Massachusetts and maybe shut Massachusetts down. They need to kind of swing down. They can't come over here because it's a bad supply spot. Like they can't get supply. So they either need to send a ranger over there or something else. Um, that won't have to worry about supply so much to lock down New Hampshire. So that's kind of a weird concern there. We got to watch out for that. So yeah, it's trying to figure out like what can we do next is a little tricky. But we'll see. We're starting to get more native units on the board, though they're not activating very frequently. Obviously, in the winter, not much is going to activate or go on. But we'll see. I definitely think the British are looking at in the spring of 1777 opening up another front somewhere, probably in Virginia, where it seems like the American defense is a little more spread out, hasn't activated. Guys haven't kind of formulated a strong stack yet. So they could come in and wreak some havoc. You know, you could imagine if they come down for a second into Virginia and they take Suffolk, leave a guy behind, jump into Yorktown, leave a guy behind, and then what? Grab Winchester. They could shut a lot of stuff down pretty quickly, and then it would be hard for the Americans to be able to quickly move stuff between the colonies for reinforcements. So we'll see how it goes. It's still an early bit of the game, and we'll see what happens in 1777, and we'll do that in the next video. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you like this video. This scenario was tricky, so if you've got any thoughts on how things are going, let me know. There's a lot going on, and just trying to figure out what to do with the strength that the British have is its own sort of trick, but we'll figure it out. See you in the next one, guys. Take care. Keep gaming.